Okay, so this is a little bit of a hot take, but honestly, I just want to break down this conversation, especially since this term has been getting utilized a lot for various demographics, because more than just Black people do it. But I do think it can be a blessing and a curse when we talk about the dangerous art of code switching. So for those who aren't familiar, I want to first play you a more humorous example of what code switching looks like in action, but it is pretty true for a lot of Black people.
So I'll make sure to get those deliverables over to you by start of day tomorrow.
Okay, before you...
Except after I get off work, I don't go and be ghetto. I just go and get matcha, and I guess my code switch is just being even bougier than I am on camera. But what is code switching? So I guess the definition of code switching is the practice of alternating between different either linguistic or cultural behaviors depending on the social context. And there's many examples of code switch. I want to give you another one because one I think is just funny of when you accidentally slip out of the code switch.
Good morning, Judge. Cesar Chakuma here on behalf of John Smith. We're here for Mr. Smith's motion to reduce bond. Bond's currently set at 100 bands. Sorry, Judge, I mean $100,000 and yeah, we need to get it reduced.
That's a look at the story of my life of so many times where I've been so proper, then all of a sudden I throw in some slang that is not supposed to be there or start throwing around certain terms that make certain people uncomfortable. And white people, they code switch too. Okay, it's not just to give you more perspective. White people also code switch. This was one of the funniest code switches I have ever seen in my life from the legendary skinny blonde and iconic Paris Hilton.
Your jacket, the sparkles are amazing.
I had a little bling here for today.
Yes. I wanted to find out who made it later.
But I think the most important thing is they need access to therapy, counseling, mentor.
So there was just no chill in Paris's code switch. And if you don't know, if you've been under a rock the last 15 of 30 years, Paris Hilton, her whole act of being the dumb ditzy blonde, like that's very much just an act. When it comes to handling business, she's actually a very fierce businesswoman and she doesn't mess around. But that's essentially what code switching is code switching is whether you're in a professional setting or if you're around different demographics of people where you are presenting yourself in a way that is adapting more to that environment. Now, before I get into why this, I feel like is affecting literacy rates, I also want to address what may be an elephant in the room for some people, where some people view code switching as fraudulent and forced because you see people like Jasmine Crockett, for example. Jasmine Crockett is one of the worst examples of code switching that I've ever seen because she kind of does the opposite of the purpose of code switching. When she's in a professional setting, that's when she decides to be hood. Jasmine Crockett only gets ghetto when the cameras are on and she's around professional people. And that to me is very alarming because when you look at the videos of her when she was younger or you look at her background, it makes no sense for her to be this hood girl and to be there just with broken English every time she's arguing with somebody during a congressional meeting. And then you have people like Kamala Harris, who notoriously throughout her entire campaign was code switching every single time she stepped foot into a different room. I actually found this compilation that had me dying.
Have empathy, man.
This is her top 5 accents.
The suffering of other people.
Jamaican gal them.
Sense of purpose.
If attention was her accent that people said was not her usual voice.
So many friends. I love you back.
I love you back. She's just missing Papi.
Hello to all my divine 9 brothers and sisters. And my
Sister girl. Sister girl,
so I tell
Kamala.
people, look, you may not be a union member. You better thank a union member.
You better call somebody.
5-day work week. You better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time.
Everywhere I go, I tell people, you may not be a union member, but you better thank unions for that 5-day work week.
Okay, and this is her in her most normal, her most natural state.
Thank unions for paid family leave. Thank unions for your vacation time.
And it's so funny that so many left-wing political candidates end up doing this code switch thing because I don't notice it on the right. And it's one of those things that made me respect the right more because I don't need you to dumb down your rhetoric in order to communicate with me. And as a Black person, that just becomes increasingly offensive. Now, recently, we've even seen I've been calling him the Islamic Zohran, Mr. Zohran. I don't know how to say Zohan's name. This man who I am praying doesn't get too much power. And that's all I'm going to say about that in the name of 501c3. But this man, like, there's so many videos out there of him now just like suddenly speaking like he has this thick accent that he does not anymore. So yes, I wanted to address that first. Like, those are some of the dangers of code switching beyond just the illiteracy factor of that. Again, I'm gonna tie this all together. But when it comes to code switching, what I will say in the defense of code switching is that I understand code switching because it does matter to an extent to be able to assimilate and adapt to your environment. And while some people would call it fake, I had to code switch a lot growing up. And in fact, with my platform, you'll see, depending on what I'm talking about or the setting, sometimes I do code switch. And it's very natural for me because for me growing up, it was survival. It truly meant survival for me. So if you don't know too much about my background, I was born in Southside Chicago, literally the worst neighborhood in Chicago. I was like a 2-3 minute walk from O Block. I spent my summers there, pretty much every other weekend there, and the first few years of my life there. So it was as hood could be. Okay, my neighbor was Chief Keef. We used to play kickball and stuff when we were little kids. And then for the most part, I grew up in central Illinois, middle of nowhere cornfields, town of 10,000 white people, 10,000 people, 95% white, very, very redneck and country, and just surrounded by corn. Everything that in that community had to do with corn. But that being said, it was very difficult for me to find out where I fit because I would feel like I was too Black for the white kids, too white for the Black kids. And when I would go around kids in the hood, I would get sometimes teased, or sometimes they would not even necessarily say anything about it. They would just kind of look at me like I was crazy because I was putting together sentences properly. And my mom would shout out to my mother would get so frustrated with me because there were times where I would come back into the house, or I would go back to my grandmother's house and she'd be there. And then I would be speaking like all the kids in the neighborhood did. And she would like grab my hands and she would be like, do you realize the reason that we left this community is because we don't want you to be like that. We don't want you to find crime and this ghetto gangsta lifestyle appealing. We don't want you to not be able to put a well-constructed sentence together. And she really helped me understand the importance of being proud of the fact that I was getting a better education than unfortunately a lot of these kids were in the Chicago public school system in Southside Chicago. And I remember my mom telling me how it was much better to have these kids think that I was a nerd and for them to secretly wish that they could articulate their thoughts in the way that I'm able to, rather than going down the same road that they were. But for me, it was like, okay, learning how to tie in a little bit of slang here and there made it to where I could still be authentically myself while still being comfortable in this setting and in this environment. So that to me was a bit of survival. So both states were a bit natural, and that's what a lot of people have. And a lot of people who come from those backgrounds, when they get into a professional setting, they do code switch. Now, where does this have an impact on literacy? So when it comes to the code switching and the different vernacular and the way that people will say things, white kids, they use slang too. White kids typically will face less linguistic dissonance though, because in their homes and their like at home language is still going to be standard English. That's going to be how they communicate at school, and it's more just with their friends that they're utilizing slang to that capacity. But when it comes to Black kids today, the Black kids are not learning the switch part. They're only learning the code. So it's way too normalized right now for Black children to only learn slang in this African-American vernacular English. Like, why do you have young Black kids who will go to class and be like, what your name is? Yes, I'm is. Yes, I'm is Xavier. That's crazy. That is crazy that in 2025, you really have kids in the hood who are speaking like that. And even if they're not necessarily the most ghetto kids, a lot of them just speak with very broken English. And it's scary when I see it rubbing off on white people, because this video has had me crying laughing for like weeks, because African-American vernacular really has some white people sounding crazy out here. Shout out to the Canadians. Justin Bieber recently tried to string together some African American vernacular, and this is what the end result was.
You're not getting it. It's not clocking to you. It's not clocking to you that I'm standing on business, is it?
He ate.
You're not getting it. It's not clocking
Oh,
to
child. He ate that down. It's not clocking to you.
Standing on business, is it?
Okay, it's not clocking to you that Justin Bieber is standing on business. And if you don't understand what that sentence meant, then that's good for you. Because that sentence was insane. Technically speaking, if you really understand African American vernacular, it's like I can piece together what he was trying to say, but just that string of words just makes no sense together. Justin Bieber, we are here to protect you. Justice for Justin Bieber. But that is what ends up being the reality when that is how people are going to school and speaking now. And I need teachers to crack down on that, because it's one thing to be able to code switch, but when you don't know how to communicate in a professional environment, nobody's going to take you seriously. If you go around sounding like Jasmine Crockett in every room that you walk into, Black children, nobody, and Black adults, nobody's going to take you seriously. Even if you're going to a doctor or you have to sit down with an attorney or any type of professional, if you want them to take you seriously, you have to be able to put together a proper sentence. You can utilize slang. I love slang. I love urban culture. I love all of that. And I blend in both because I know when it's appropriate and when it is not. You're not going to see me go talking to high level people and using all type of hood rattery rhetoric. Okay, you don't do that. But these kids today aren't learning the art of the switch. And whether they have a father in the home or not, that lack of code switch is why these kids cannot read. Because when they go and they look at a page and it's like it's structured in a way that's proper, these kids don't know how to interpret it because it's not the way that they hear it typically. When I say what your name is, I'm thinking of kids that I grew up with who that was how they said everything. Everything was such a broken, just jumble cluster of words that makes no sense on paper. So when these kids go and try to write down something and articulate something, it makes no sense. And then they get frustrated and then it demoralizes them all over again. So I really need teachers to stop allowing this slang in the class. And there are teachers that are now starting to call this out. I saw this video on TikTok and I think it deserves a lot more credit.
These kids can barely read. They can barely fucking read. And y'all arguing so they can say standing on business in the middle of class instead of fully articulating thoughts. Some of them are 14, 15, still putting because BCUZ in a freaking essay. And they're dead serious and they don't even see it.
As a kid that did have academic issues, I was smart, but I communicated the way I communicate. And for you to shut me up or tell me that I had to do it in a different way might have made me not want to participate.
Nobody said you can never say these words ever in this building. I'm saying during my period, during this 50-minute class, don't say the shit that you say to your friends. So we can't allow children to slide by and do these things when they're still in their developmental stages and years. You should be able to adhere to these rules for 50, 70 minutes a day sometimes. That's it.
I cannot verbally express enough how much I love that video because it's so real. And I wanted you guys to see the full clip too. So you see there, because I understand that there's pushback on that. There are people like that gentleman there who would say that if you're not able to communicate if you're not able to communicate in a way that's more comfortable to you, then there might be students who feel, off put by that. But at the same time, it's like, it's okay for you to feel off put. I'm a firm believer if your comfort zone is where your dreams die, and if you have to become uncomfortable in order to put together a proper sentence or know how to say yes instead of saying bet as an answer, I think that's okay. I think that's what you need to be able to do. You have to have the ability to do both. Okay, if you're a little kid and you're going to recess, or you're a kid and you're just hanging out by the lockers, then say all the slang that it is that you want to say. But when you are in the classroom, the whole point of these classrooms is to prepare these children for the workspace. And you are not preparing for the workspace if you are unable to speak properly for 50 minutes at a time. So we need more teachers that are cracking down on that. And I think back to the school I went to, again, in the cornfields, it was even as simple as, can I go to the bathroom? And the teachers would be like, can you? It's, may you go to the bathroom? It's little things like that sit in your head and they register. The little changes All it takes is the little changes to get these kids to be more proper in the classroom. And then I call this next section was that a super chat? Sup, Xavier. Anthony Towns. I think it's also pop culture. There's a new Marvel show just released called Iron Heart, and it promoted criminal/ghetto culture. Oh, we're going to get to that, child. 100%. 100%. And thank you so much, Anthony, for sending in that super chat. It is very much tied into our pop culture today because you look at shows like Baddies and all this stuff. The thing is, when I was a kid, because I watched Bad Girls Club with my cousins when I was in high school, but we didn't go to school acting like Bad Girls Club. I watched Jersey Shore as a kid. I didn't go to school acting like Jersey Shore, even though my friends did call me the Negro Guido for a little bit because I wanted to be Pauly D so bad, but that's a story for another day. But all that to say, you can't allow culture to be your excuse as to why you are conducting yourself in a certain way. You can't allow the input from TV shows to be the whole reason why you can't put a sentence together.